Hello everybody, welcome back to 3-2 Brew. We are going to be doing a bit of the Goblin Guy project update here. I got through what I'm going to call week 0 of testing. So this is with the Goblins, what I'm calling 1.0. This is my initial build of the deck. Going to do some feedback. I don't have great data set up yet. Don't know exactly how I'm going to do the visualization for it yet. Haven't decided fully. But I want to go over some stuff here. So let's talk about statistics overall. Do a little zoom in here for us. So overall, we went 13 and 14 on our game wins and losses. So we actually had a negative win rate on the games, but our match rate went 5 and 5. I only had 5 on meta testing abilities, and I went 3 and 2 on meta against, I counted the Rock New, Red Green Oath, I counted White Control, Sly, and White Control. Rock Aggro was a different build, as was Pit Rock. 17 Land Stompy's a bit outside of meta. So these are stuff I would commonly see, I believe, in store. I went win both times against White Control. That felt like a pretty good matchup. I lost bad against Sly. I did have some bad draws, but I don't think it would have changed anything. I won against Red Green Oath, and I lost 1-2 against the new Rock. So overall, a winning record on meta, but I'd like to see a bit higher win rate. I did a breakdown of my play versus draw as well. I went 2 and 2 on the play, and I went 3 and 3 on the draw. So very interesting. Some stuff here I want to note. Let's go back over to the actual deck view. The mana base in this deck is far too frustrating. There is too many games where I'm sitting with just too much colorless sitting on the board or not enough lands to do what I need to do. This is a tough one. We had 3 Port, 3 Wasteland. Now, I recently listened to the I Got Questions podcast where they interviewed the recent winner of the Premodern webcam monthlies, and they played green black, and I believe they cut most Wastelands. I haven't seen their deck list yet, but I heard them talk about it. I do believe Wasteland can be cut. This is not a deck where I really want to sit and have to deal with the Wastelands and potentially have them flop or just be a raw colorless source. Rashad Port is always going to be helpful. That's what I like about Rashad Port. It's always good. It's always there. Wasteland is hit or miss. Yes, there's a good amount of non-basics running around the format right now. I understand that. But it just doesn't, this isn't like, fetch shock, fetch duel type of format. So I'm not as high on Wasteland. I love Wasteland. I think Wasteland's one of the best designed cards of all time. But in this particular deck, I'm not super high on it. My other piece here as well is these lines are extremely punishing. So I think that me being a noob to this deck in general is just going to give me a terrible play experience. I really didn't love playing this deck right now. I'll be brutally honest, everyone. I am not super high on this deck. It doesn't feel great in my hands. I'm not enjoying it as much as I was hoping I would, but that's okay. I kind of understood coming in and was somewhat aware that this deck is going to be very punishing to start at the very, very minimum. So, that being said, I do think I need to know the meta and decks a bit better. When I see certain things come out, I need to be guessing, okay, they dropped in, Wooded Foothills. They could be Goblins. They could be Red-Green Panza. They could be potentially Burn. Stuff like that. So understanding the meta a bit better, I think, would help me. But also, I just noticed in some of these games, one misstep in terms of sequencing or how you play or guessing can be detrimental. Had that in one of my White Control matchups. Just didn't fully know what they were on yet. Didn't see exactly what they had. Didn't know what White Control looked like as a deck list. So I just overplayed to the board, Wrath of God, and sat there, twiddled my thumbs for the rest of the game as I slowly got beat down by different pieces and basically locked out. White Control was an interesting matchup. I did play it twice. The humilities are really bad. I didn't bring in the right board stuff for it all the time. Still squeaked out 2 1s, but it felt really, really sketchy. On that subject matter, the sideboard matters so much with this deck, both in construction and in the way that it's played. So messing up the decision to actually sideboard what you should bring in and what you can't bring in and what you should cut is very, 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 very important. I am not great with that yet. and I do think that I will need a guide for this deck. Understanding, sorry if you hear me sniffling, I got a runny nose today, but understanding what is going on with the sideboard, what I should be sideboarding, and what should I be looking for, you know, how to mulligan, all that stuff I think is extremely important for this deck, and I am going to need a guide, which I will slowly be building out as time progresses. Now, the overall record is something I want to speak on as well when it comes to play and draw. I ended up being 2-2 on the play and 3-3 on the draw. This is actually a positive and somewhat of a little bit negative personally. That's a good record. Being 50-50 on both the play and draw is not a bad thing. Obviously, you want to be positive, but I really do think that it's nice that we were 3-3 on the draw. I think that's a big plus for this deck and shows that it has the ability to win still on the draw. This isn't just an aggro deck, which I like about it. What I will say is I want to be a little bit higher on the play. It was only 4 matches. This is a small sample size. This is more of me trying to feel out the deck for the first time, and then let's see what we can do for tweaking and potential tune-ups. So I do think we need to be lights out in the play, but it felt good that we can win on the draw. Not every deck feels that way, and I am A-okay with the fact that we are able to still pull out 2-1 wins or 2-0 wins on the draw. It's awesome. It's a great feeling overall. So I like that about the deck, to say the least. As I was going through, I was doing some theory crafting. I haven't dove deep into the actual Goblin lineup yet when it comes to stuff available. That'll be a future state thing. This was more just getting my basis with the cards I have on hand now, both digitally and physically. So let's talk about some changes that I'm going to use to try and tune this deck up a bit. Give it a bit more consistency and maybe a bit more explosive power, while not sacrificing too much of that kind of sinking control game. So what I did here is talk about the main board first. Looks a little bit different. Same splits, 34 creatures, 3 instants, 23 lands. Now I did say I was missing some land drops sometimes. We'll talk about that. The main deck, I took out 3 Wastelands, 2 Goblin Tinkerers, and I took out 1 Mog Fanatic. Now, I've heard debates primarily on the podcast about Mog Fanatic and Pile Driver. You know, like Pile Driver is not a great 2-drop, etc., etc. I can't argue that Pile Driver doesn't feel bang up, to be fair, but I actually don't mind it. It is a threat that has to be dealt with and hopefully is something that gets taken care of and opens a door for your War Chief. To me, it feels a little bit like counterbait. Whenever you play EDH and you're trying to push something through, you toss up some nice counterbait, see if the table will react, and then you can slam down your big hit. So I did take out quite a bit of colorless sources. I took out 2 Goblin Tinkers, which I'll get to, and I took out 1 Mog Fanatic overall. Now, what I ended up doing in the mana base was I added another mountain so that we have 9 mountains and the ability to kind of deal with potential issues that we have when it comes to finding red. I left the ports. I had them as a 4, and then I started rethinking. I actually added Ancient Tombs. Now, Ancient Tombs are going to be bad against Sly. Let's just be frank about that. But I like the concept of turn 1 mountain, dropping a lackey. It gets swords. Turn 2, drop Ancient Tomb, throw down a Goblin Matron, tutor up what I want to hit, whether it be a Goblin Ringleader, whether it be a War Chief, whether it be an Incinerator if I want to clear something or draw an extra card. I can tutor up Prospector, all sorts of things. Having a turn 2 Matron is never bad. It just gives you, it's basically like a turn 2 Demonic Tutor in this deck, which is fantastic. So I think Ancient Tomb is going to have a ton of run here. I'm very excited to give it a shot. We do not have that much heavy pip dependence. Yes, we have Siege Gang who needs 2 red. Yes, we have Goblin War Chief who needs 2 red. And yes, we need 2 red for Goblin King, but that's only in here as a one-off. So we have 8 out of our 34 creatures are double red. We still need red, which is why we have, what is this? 4, 13, 17 red sources out of our 23 lands. I personally think that's a pretty bang-up number. Before, it was a little bit less. I have thought about going up to 24 lands and cutting something like another Pile Driver or something, but I'm not a fan of that for this moment. I want to give Ancient Tomb a moment in the sun. Let's see how it feels. How bad is it? How good is it? I do think that this mana base will be a little bit better I just don't think it's going to be perfect yet, and we're still going to need some tuning. Maybe it ends up being 2 ports, 2 Ancient Tombs, or maybe it becomes 1 Ancient Tomb. I'm not 100% sure yet. So just going to chill on that for the moment. I also, with the taking out 2 Goblin Tinkers and 1 Mog Fanatic. So Mog Fanatic is great in some matchups, but other matchups it's just kind of a dead card, just an extra body. It does help with the sack fodder for Goblin Sharpshooter, but I don't think it's necessary due to adding in a second Skirk Prospector. So what I ended up doing was I brought in 1 Goblin King, 1 Skirk Prospector, and based off the recent Will Hurst podcast, I got questions. I also brought in 1 Goblin Pyromancer. I took a look at this card. I was driving while I was listening, so once I got back home, I was able to pull up my phone in the parking lot and take a look at what Goblin Pyromancer does. When the ETBs, all goblins get +3/+0 until end of turn. At end of turn, destroy all goblins. I think that's pretty cracked. I'm a huge fan of it. It does a lot of work for me. I like that, you know, it's a 2/2 body. It doesn't have haste, which is a bit of a bummer, but I tossed this in here and added in a second Skirk Prospector. The second Skirk Prospector, this is great with that card because you can sack it. The downside of this, at the end of turn, destroy all goblins. So I can sack this, doesn't trigger, I'm good to go. What I do like about Skirk Prospector, and what the person who ran black red goblins noted, is that they normally swords the first Skirk Prospector, don't expect the second. I like that. So I also bought 2 foil Skirk Prospectors when I was back in PA. Not going to sit here in front about it. So I got 2 Skirk Prospectors on hand, and I'm able to play with them. I want to give it a run. I think that the additional sack, and the way that I believe Will Hurst actually pointed out, or maybe it was his guest, was that they use the Skirk Prospector like a lotus petal sometimes. And I like that theory and that process, I think makes a ton of sense to me. So Skirk Prospector, I think, is going to have a ton of upside. I'm very excited to try and run 2 of them. There was times where I wanted my Sharpshooter but didn't have a Prospector, which will still happen, but it's Matron, hopefully, with 2 Skirk Prospectors, I can start my hand with enough gas to get Skirk Prospector down in a reasonable time, Matron up a Sharpshooter, or Ringleader up a Sharpshooter. One thing I do want to note, the tutors of this deck is a very, very, very complex line. Knowing what to tutor, when to tutor, is very difficult. I've often found myself, I see a lot of people tutoring up War Chief. There's certain situations where War Chief is the correct answer, but it feels like the best answer in most situations is actually Goblin Ringleader. I think Goblin Ringleader is bang up perfect. It's a great restock. We have over half our deck being goblins, so I personally really, really like Ringleader. Siege Gang is great in the occasion, but I rarely find myself tutoring up a Siege Gang, especially if I go turn 1 Lackey, turn 2, Matron, and then turn 3 if I can hit with the Lackey again. I normally want to grab, I normally wanted to grab Ringleader off the Matron, because I think Ringleader just gives you as much as you can. A lot of it is matchup dependent, so I just got to kind of figure out both a sideboarding method and a tutor method, kind of a matrix for the meta. It's going to take a bit of time to really get correct and understand, but it is something that I enjoy about this deck, is that there's a lot of lines to it. I really enjoy decks with a ton of lines and enjoyment, just trying to figure them out. It's punishing, but it's also very fun and rewarding once you get it down. My final addition I want to note in the main board here is Goblin King. Seen this one kicking around in a couple different lists. This is a very interesting card. Goblin King getting +1 and +1 and having Mountain Walk to all other goblins is, in my opinion, very good. It can be a mirror breaker. So if we get into the Goblin's Mirror, I can tutor up King and toss that down, and then boom, we're getting in there untouched, unquestioned, everything. It's a very interesting concept. I want to try it. I want to give it a run. I cut it from my initial list. The original list was kind of chopped up from just a stock list I found online that did relatively well. So I like Goblin King a lot. I think there's a ton of upside to Goblin King as a one-of. It's a tutor target. It's very nice. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. Does it have game against Sly? Probably not. But again, if it gets hit by a bolt, that's a gain 3 life. So it is a big threat against them, because then they can't lay down their blocks as they want to. But it's a whole separate issue. Sly felt really tough, which is thanks to a recommendation from my community member, whose name I'm sorry I don't have off the top of my head, but you were in the comments, and I will figure it out next time when I could do a recap on this video for week 1. They recommended cutting the overload for Zoran orbs. I was very in between on this. Didn't know if it'd be a good idea or not. You know, I really like overloads. I got foil versions of them in person, so I don't really want to cut them, but I do think after playing against Sly that we do need Zoran orbs, and a lot of the, you know, aggro decks will be great, especially with Ancient Tomb being added into the mix. I think at least 2 Zoran orbs are a must. The sideboard I do want to talk about now. So I took out 2 overloads and I took out a pyrokinesis, and I added in 1 Zoran orb and 1 goblin tinker. So I cut the Tinkerers from the main and added it into the sideboard here. I do like the option to have at least 1 as a tutor target if we're playing against Mox Diamonds and stuff like that. I think it'll be very, very good there. We won't have that game 1, which is a bit of a downside, but I want to give Pyromancer a run. I could definitely see a Tinkerer coming back in for Pyromancer if this doesn't perform to the place that I would like it to, and then just running 1 more in the sideboard as an additional hit. Tinkerer feels good, feels very good when you have a War Chief down and you can tutor it up, drop it for 1, and then blow something up instantly. Very, very good there. The overloads I brought in quite a bit, but I don't think I was bringing them in correctly, to be fair. So I think Zoran Orb is going to have more of an impact. We don't have a small amount of lands, but we don't have a great amount of lands either. And with Ancient Tomb giving us 2 damage every time we use it, Zoran Orb is going to go a long distance in a lot of matchups. So it's an interesting concept. I like the 3 Crypts a lot as well. Just want to note that. I think Crypts have a lot of run here. They have a lot of space. I think they're great value. The Pyrokinesis dropping 1. As I thought about this format, I don't really know what Pyrokinesis is hidden that we need to worry about. Pyrokinesis is great when you're playing against like elves or something like that, you know, because you can divide it up. But we also have Sharpshooter for elves. So it's like, what do we need Pyrokinesis for? Pyrokinesis does not kill a Phyrexian Negator. Pyrokinesis does not kill an Exalted Angel. Pyrokinesis does not kill Grinning Demon. Pyrokinesis does not kill most of, whatchamacallit? Most of stuff in, blanked on the name of it. On Replenish. I guess it does, but at the same time it doesn't. It's a whole separate issue, but it doesn't kill a Dreadnought. It doesn't do a lot of things that I would like it to do. So and the elephants, it kills an elephant, but then they just flash it back, and then I'm down 2 cards, and they have a card advantage of 1. That's why elephants are so tough, in my opinion, to deal with. I'd rather take them on a different line. So Pyrokinesis, I am less high on. I'm still going to leave it in. I think there is situational pieces for it. It is a good removal spell, but I don't really like taking card disadvantage to kill something that is going to just be flashback at card advantage. So not a huge fan of that, but the Tinker was slotted in for it. Pyrokinesis is going to be on my watch list. Overall, let's talk about this. This deck is good. I want to be out there. I know that I was kind of low on it in my notes. A lot of it's just me not meshing early on with the deck. I am very well aware that this deck is good. Pile drivers are apparently on the cutting block for quite a few people. I've seen a lot of lists only running 3 of them. That's an interesting concept. I could see dropping a pile driver for a Fnatic, or dropping a pile driver and adding in, you know, a 4th Gem Palm Incinerator as a way to remove creatures. But then that kind of only gives us 3 real creatures, or 30 real creatures instead of 31. So there's some weird kind of stuff you got to dance around with here. But this deck is powerful. It can win explosively. It can sit into a long game if you play correctly and you understand the lines. I have felt that. And I've seen videos of people doing it. I'm just not good enough for the deck yet, and that's okay. I am very hopeful for the future of this deck. There was a moment where I was kind of like, man, I really don't know if I should do this. Like, maybe I overstepped here. Maybe I thought I'd like goblins more than I did. And I still have that slight feeling. But at the same time, I do think that I'm going to end up really enjoying this deck once I get good at it. I do believe it's a skill-based issue, which is why we saw a 5-5 record. I think there's a lot for me to learn and to grow here and to have a lot of fun as a player. And I think talking to people as well who play this deck and are, just not seen by a lot of people, but they're like, I rock this deck a ton. I play it. Here's my knowledge base, etc., etc. I think there's a lot to do with goblins. I think there's a lot of space to innovate. We could try red-white goblins. We could try red-black goblins. We could try red-blue goblins. We could try mono-red goblins. I do think that at some point I might give it a shot to try different colors, but for now, I want to stick here. I think this is what's best in the meta. I don't want to leave home without my Tranquil Domains. I'm just going to be honest. Tide looks dreadful to play against. So I don't want to leave home without my Tranquil Domains. We also have just a lot of action going on in general here. I think that, you know, Tinker is a good answer. I like being able to pack 4 counter spells out the sideboard for blue decks. Could maybe even pack more if it was mono red, but that's a separate issue. Mono red has been on my radar as well. I think mono red has some play, but the lack of enchantment hate is going to absolutely muck us up in this entire meta. So don't want that to happen. I really think Tranquil Domain is going to be a house out the sideboard. I'm a huge fan of that. Zoran Orb, I'm excited to give a shot to. This is a fun deck. Like, it's very, very frustrating for me because it's just not a deck that I think I'm used to playing or what I'm really that great at as a player. I recently tested Dead Guy Ale and felt completely in my zone when I first hated Dead Guy Ale as well. I just didn't have the right deck, right mana base, etc. Just didn't feel good. So I'm very high on Dead Guy Ale right now, and I think I'm going to get there with Goblins once I just understand the lines a bit better. So I hope everybody's enjoyed. I'm sorry for the lack of gameplay. I'm hoping for true week 1 that I'm able to get some gameplay together to patch on to the end here, maybe talk about it as well. My wife is away on a trip this week, so I should have a lot more time to be able to sit down and test and do all sorts of things. I will figure out some data visualization, some data breakdowns for everyone. I do believe I'm looking to possibly link that as well, so you can come in and climb and look at it and maybe even see my notes and whatnot. So I hope everybody enjoyed this. This has been 3-2 Brew, and until next time, cheers.